Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 27th of December, 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, hope you all had a great Christmas over the weekend. On Friday, I just realized pretty late that it was Christmas Eve, and I'm like, oh god, I'm busy right now. I don't think I'm going to have time to do the refuel, so I did an announcement in the Discord channel saying that I'd do a refuel on Monday and take a kind of break on Friday. So yeah, I'm back here. Not much has happened actually over the last few days. It obviously being kind of Christmas time, end of year, things slowed down considerably. So not much has happened on the kind of projects update front or anything like that. So got a few things to get through today, but not that much. I will keep doing the refuel all the way through. I think New Year's actually. What New Year's Eve is on a Friday as well. So I may not do. I think it's this Friday. So I may not do it this Friday. And then New Year's Day is a Saturday. So I probably won't do a refuel this Friday. But as I said, there's not much happening right now. The markets seem to be quiet too. NFTs seem to be catching a bit again. I've noticed over the last 24 hours, which is funny to see. But I think pretty much January is going to be packed. I think a lot of projects right now are waiting until January to announce certain things, whether they announce, come out of stealth, whether they announce major updates or anything like that. Because right now it really is the skeleton crew online. I've noticed the Twitter kind of people on Twitter are just definitely kind of a lot less. And I also noticed that the biggest thing to happen was the SOS airdrop, whatever that kind of was there. I didn't look too much into it. I just saw it and I kind of claimed mine and sold it because I'm like, oh, well, some more ETH. But yeah, anyway, let's get into the updates from the last 3 days. One thing that I wanted to talk about was this thing from Zhang, who is the co-founder and works in research at Scroll. Now, Scroll is one of the ZK teams that I've been speaking about for quite a while now. And he shared on Twitter basically a research post from a team at Consensus working on ZK stuff, basically specifying the zkEVM. Now, you'll have listened to me talk about the zkEVM quite a lot on the refuel and about how multiple teams are attempting this. It's basically attempting to create a generalized generalized EVM platform built on ZK technology. So obviously we have that with optimistic rollups right now with Arbitrum and Optimism and a few others out there, but we don't have it for ZK yet. We have generalized ZK stuff like what Starkware is building with Starknet, but that is not EVM compatible or EVM equivalent or anything like that. That is using their own language and their own kind of technology there. Whereas the Holy Grail that people are working towards right now, a lot of people believe the Holy Grail is this zkEVM thing. Now, Polygon is working on this. I think zkSync is working on this. I'm sure Starkware has been looking into this. Scroll is definitely working on it. And Consensus here has put together a spec, basically kind of trying to define what a zkEVM looks like so that everyone's working off the same thing. Because you can have different implementations of it. Polygon could have their own zkEVM and zkSync could have their own and Scroll could have their own. But it kind of just creates complexities. It's kind of okay, well, if we want a zkEVM, why not just all of us build something to a spec, right? Why not build something similar? Why not build it so that we can all kind of know what's going on with it instead of reinventing the wheel, so to speak? So that's exactly what's being done here with this PDF that you can read by the Consensus team. So just download it here and kind of open it. So this is a specification for zkEVM done by the Consensus applied R&D team, and you can see the names of the people that did this up here. It's a 41-page kind of specification. It is very, very technical. I mean, don't bother reading it if you don't know the technicals of not only ZK tech but also the EVM and just general kind of blockchain, low-level blockchain stuff. I definitely didn't read this myself because I knew exactly what it was. I mean, you can see all the equations and everything in here. This is not for the average kind of person to give it a read. But as I just described to you what it was, basically the abstract is, and I can basically read out the abstract here to get a kind of full breakdown. This is basically in plain English what this paper is. So in kind of the specification, the Consensus Applied R&D team describes a zkEVM arithmetization supporting the three following design goals: support for all EVM opcodes, including internal smart contract codes, error management and gas management, ability to execute bytecode as is, and minimal prover time. We strive to provide an arithmetization that respects the EVM specification as defined in the Ethereum Yellow Paper. We provide an original and comprehensive approach of the zkEVM problem, which is technically realizable using existing zero-knowledge proving schemes. So this is pretty exciting, right? Because if I mean, if this does work practically, obviously it's just a paper right now, but if it does work practically, it means that we basically have the Ethereum as it exists today, the EVM as it exists today in a ZK form. Now, obviously ZK tech is amazing, but still very early days, and that's why people are working on this sort of stuff. You can see here, Vitalik basically commented saying this is amazing work. Are there any draft implementations? Because there's the paper, then there's the implementations. We obviously want to see the implementations. I don't know if there's any implementations yet. I think it's just the paper, but I'm sure we're going to see more and more of this stuff come out over the coming months from the various ZK teams, because as I said, this is the holy grail. Once we crack this, once we get kind of like a generalized EVM using ZK tech, it becomes something that a lot of people are going to use very quickly. I think it's going to get adoption very quickly. And I think the reason why things like, I mean, Starknet's had some pretty decent adoption, same with StarkX and things like that. But imagine if Starkware's ZK tech was built using the EVM, right? Like how many projects would have already deployed there? So, and they've just gone a different approach there, which I actually think is healthy, because we don't, I mean, the EVM isn't perfect. The EVM is basically, I guess like you could say, Solidity is basically the JavaScript of the crypto world, of the Web3 world. It is going to be around forever. It's probably going to be dominant forever, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be attempting to make other kind of virtual machines adopt other languages, and that's exactly what Starkware is doing. zkSync is also trying to do it with their LLVM. Polygon has a bunch of different kind of efforts going on there, but really getting a zkEVM to work in production is a huge deal. So yeah, go give this specification a read if you're interested in that sort of stuff. As I said, very, very heavy on the technical, low-level core kind of like devy stuff. So yeah, just a fair warning there. So 0x Mons, basically for a little bit of a Christmas present, put out a video here where they decided to vampire attack OpenSea infrastructure with SudoSwap. So any OpenSea link for an NFT now redirects to SudoSwap if you change the P to a W, making it ONC. One click to make swap offers and asset pages let you see what offers have been made. Now, SudoSwap is being built on, I think, zkSync, last time I checked, or at least it was experimenting with zkSync. But, the funny thing is with these kind of like vampire attacks on OpenSea, or at least kind of like these competitors to OpenSea, is that they couldn't be coming soon enough. I think OpenSea has enjoyed way too much of a, I guess, like a cruisy adoption cycle where there hasn't really been any competition for them. They need competition. They're not bad, but they could be so much better than what they are. And I think I mentioned it on the Refuel maybe a couple of weeks ago or something, how they are actually planning to do an IPO and not issue a token. I'm not sure if they're going to change their tune there, because a lot of people are upset that they're not doing a token. But if they did choose to do an IPO instead of a token, I mean, that really does kind of like open the floodgates to a bunch of vampire attacks to come in and basically say, well, we're like OpenSea, but we have a token, and get the community on board. Now, whether it works is another kind of thing, because vampire attacking can be pretty lucrative in the short term if you have a token, if you have a good narrative behind it. But there's a lot more to running a product like OpenSea than just slapping a token on it and forking the infrastructure and the code. And obviously, 0x Mons knows this. I'm not saying that they have done this thinking that ONC is going to, completely destroy OpenSea overnight or anything like that. They are building a kind of NFT ecosystem with SudoSwap and stuff like that. But essentially, yeah, I mean, I think people get this false sense of security where they're basically like, oh, okay, we can just easily fork this code, we can fork this infrastructure, and we can just run this thing with a token, and we're going to be the best, and we're going to take over the world. That's just not how it works. There's so much more that goes into building a successful product and service. I mean, not only is it really hard to break the incumbent's network effect, even if you do a vampire attack with liquidity or whatever, you do some liquidity mining or whatever you want to call it, and do some airdrops or whatever, you also have to have the experience. You have to have the team there. You have to be able to outcompete the ecosystem that you're vampire attacking. Like, for example, the classic example of a vampire attack is SushiSwap on Uniswap. Now, SushiSwap isn't a failure, but it is nowhere near as big as Uniswap, right? Like, Uniswap is still miles bigger, and that's because Uniswap wasn't just this thing that sat around and stopped innovating. They kept innovating. They came out with V3, which has been a huge success. They also did their token, I think, partly in response to SushiSwap, and at least they did it sooner than they probably would have liked, which got a bunch of people back as well, because they did the awesome airdrop and things like that. But the SushiSwap kind of experiment seemed to run into a lot of trouble over time because it was very chaotic. It was, we see kind of like with how the team, I mean, the team seemed to not be as cohesive as they could have been. They kind of like was a ragtag crew of people, really good people, really cool people working on it. But in the end, it just couldn't compete with Uniswap, right? Because they vampire attacked basically the king. And then the king's like, well, I'm still king. Like, I'm still going to keep building here. We're still going to keep building products out. We're still going to keep getting adoption. And that's exactly what happened with that. So I don't think OpenSea can be vampire attacked without kind of like a strong team behind the vampire attacking happening. There has to be like an actual concerted effort. But, it could be the same thing where OpenSea basically says, well, okay, we got forked and they did a token and now they're kind of sucking liquidity away from us. Let's just do a token and it'll all be well and good. But anyway, still cool to see this. Still cool. I mean, I'm not against forking projects. I think it's fine. As long as it's kind of like an open source license or anything, things like that. But yeah, cool to see these from 0x Mons here. So Lucas from Banxa put together this amazing thread on the best yields for your ETH. So this is a bunch of different kind of like opportunities that you have for earning basically a yield on your ETH. So he goes through that the Banxa ST ETH / wrapped ETH pool currently gives 7% APY. So this is current as at December 24th. I don't know if it's changed since then. It's only been 3 days, but yields in crypto can change quite quickly. But yeah, Banxa Labs ST ETH pool is currently paying out 7% ETH denominated yield, mind you. And then you have Yearn, which is paying at 8%. You have Token Reactor, which is also, or Tokamak, which is also paying out 8%, up to 70% if you have token rewards included in that. Ribbon Finance's STF covered call vault has 28% APY. And then Redacted, he says here, has over 60 API, which is hint uses Uniswap v3 and always outperforms ETH in a bull market. And then you've got like a link to a blog post here with the best yields on ETH, USD, and BTC. So these are all risky and come with their own kind of like trade-off, security risks, some impermanent loss depending on what you're doing. And obviously trading options is not risk-free. It can be very risky if you don't know what you're doing. But it's really cool to see that there's like a much bigger ecosystem these days on earning on your ETH, right? Like obviously you can do staking with your ETH and you can earn 5 to 6% on your own, just staking on your own, or you can stake through something like Lido and then restake your staked Lido in a pool, on a liquidity pool and get more APY like that. Or you could do the same thing with Rocket Pool with your RETH and stuff like that. But, vanilla ETH staking is about 5 to 6% ETH denominated, right? It's not USD denominated, it's ETH denominated, which, as I've explained before, if ETH goes up like 2x, then that yield is basically 2x because essentially you've got the ETH denominated yield and then you've got the ETH price increase against USD as well, which is really, really cool. And, there's going to be more opportunities as time goes on as well. I mean, there are plenty out there. It just depends on what your risk tolerance is, and there's impermanent loss that comes into things as well if you're providing liquidity on stuff. With options, there's a risk of things expiring worthless, and if you don't know how options work, I suggest kind of reading up on them before getting involved there. But this just speaks to what I've been saying for a long time about how ETH is just this incredibly productive asset. You can earn a yield on it. You can obviously use it for fees. You can kind of like stake it. You can use it as collateral within DeFi, even if you're not earning a yield on it. Like, that's the thing as well. You can basically put your ETH into like a money market, borrow stablecoins against it, and then go earn a USD denominated yield. Or what you could do if you're feeling especially risky, put your ETH in a money market, borrow USD against it, go buy more ETH, leverage up on ETH, and then put that ETH into something to earn yield on it. Or you could just kind of like borrow ETH, depending on what's most capital efficient, and do all that sort of stuff there. Obviously, there's liquidation risks there and all that stuff there. So it's more risky, but the higher the risk, the higher the reward, right? We all know that. But anyway, go give this a blog post to read. It's published in Banxa from Lucas here. It was a good one. So Kain from Synthetics put out a tweet a few days ago, or yesterday, I think, where he said, last week I sent an email out to 6 projects offering them a mentorship in exchange for a commitment to launch on Optimism. I wanted to keep it to 3, but honestly couldn't decide which ones to cut. They are all great. I'm going to turn it into a program and publish it. And then he says L2 2022. And yes, I will be encouraging them to all launch via Alien Protocol. So Kain has been doing a very big push to get more and more projects onto Optimism, which I think is sorely needed. I think, there's 3 main things when I'm thinking about kind of like L2 adoption that needs to happen. First one, there needs to be a token, right? Like, all these ecosystems that you see get lots of TVL, lots of kind of liquidity and users. They all have token incentives. This is just how we're going to bootstrap usage of anything. L2s, L1s, sidechains, whatever it is, token incentives are the best way to bootstrap things. So that's the first thing there. Second thing, there needs to be a concerted push from community leaders to get projects to actually launch on these things. The merits need to be explained to them. Basically, it inherits Ethereum security and decentralization while offering cheaper fees, and they will get better over time, and the ecosystem will grow over time, and then you may get some token incentives as well added on top of that. So there really needs to be a push there. Like, I'm pushing it all the time. Kain's been pushing it a lot. There's a lot of other people in the Ethereum ecosystem that are pushing it, but we need to keep doing that and doing it in a big way. And thirdly, the actual infrastructure and the actual teams building these L2s need to really push on the marketing and business development themselves. They really need to do what Polygon's been doing. I know I'm going to go on about Polygon's marketing a lot, but they are kind of like best in class when it comes to this sort of stuff. There's a reason why they have pretty much everything on the POS chain, and that's in large part due to their business development and marketing efforts. They really, truly understand that's kind of like how to grow an ecosystem, coupled with token incentives. There were Matic token incentives originally on the POS chain, and then they kind of built up a base, and now it's kind of been steady growing and steady growing. And I think the Polygon POS chain is actually the most used chain, even more so than these other alt L1s. So it works, right? Marketing, business development, they work really well. Goes hand in hand sometimes with token incentives. Like, I think token incentives can be a form of marketing and business development as well. Get a lot more attention on your project, get a lot more people involved, a lot more people kind of like on there, and there's some sort of sticky liquidity that kind of like stays around once those token incentives taper off or go away completely. So I'm hoping to see more of that in 2022. As Kain says here, L2 2022, that's what we're all kind of like pushing towards. As I said before, I think within the next 6 months, maybe even 3 to 6 months, all the L2s are going to do tokens, especially in reaction to what's been happening with other L2s that already have tokens. I mean, Metis is a fork of Optimism, I believe. They have a token, and that token's gone pretty ballistic in price, right? And they have a big army now on Twitter that I've been seeing of people just basically shilling them, or kind of like shilling has a negative connotation attached to it, but I mean it as in like kind of like talking about them a lot, promoting them, getting projects to deploy there, all that sort of stuff. So that's a strong thing. But also, I think the technology is just going to keep getting better and better, exponentially better in 2022. And we're going to have a lot more projects launched there, which is going to give users something to do. Because at the end of the day, the users are going to go where the products are, where the money is, where the incentives are. And we have a really awesome opportunity to do this with L2 and take a lot of those users back from the alternative L1s. But not only that, because as I said before, the fact that we're fighting over a small set of users right now is kind of like missing the forest for the trees. I think what we need to do is focus on the new users pouring in, and that's kind of like where the centralized exchanges come in with their onboarding as well. And I would say that that's kind of like the fourth pillar. Maybe there's more than three. There's the kind of like three major pillars for L2 adoption. The fourth would be the centralized exchange bridging and the fiat on-ramps, which basically go hand in hand. I think we're going to see a lot more of that happening in 2022 as well, to capture those new users, not only the existing users that we have out there today. So speaking of fiat on-ramps, Arbitrum announced that Banxa now allows users to convert their fiat to crypto that can be used on Arbitrum 1. So this is just another kind of, option for you guys if you want to go straight from fiat to Arbitrum, to crypto, and then to Arbitrum 1, which is always awesome to see. I mean, these smaller ones are cool. Like, I think it's all additive. But man, these centralized exchanges are dragging their feet. I really hope they're kind of like just going to do it in January and February. I really hope it doesn't take until like mid-year for them to do it, because it really needs to happen. I think even with token incentives on these L2s, it's still not going to be enough to get the users that we want onboarded, because the L1 gas fees are pretty high. Now, obviously, if there's token incentives, people will be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just eat the L1 gas fees because I'm going to make it back with these token incentives. But the token incentives can't last forever. And I don't think these L2s should do like overly aggressive ones either. They should do, kind of like big ones, get some kind of like headlines around it, get some marketing from it. But I don't think they should do it in such a way that It basically just attracts like extreme amounts of mercenary capital that just leave after it's done. But I also hope that they have more kind of like bridges into these L2s before they even do it, because if they don't, what ends up happening is that I think it's just going to onboard the existing users rather than the new users. And what we want are the new users. The existing users have already used kind of like Ethereum. They've probably already used many of the L2s, at least tried them in one way or another. But we need the new users, the millions, the tens of millions of people that will come on chain over the coming years, hundreds of millions. We need them to kind of use these technologies, and that's kind of where we get the real benefits from. But they won't use it unless there's an actual bridge from their centralized exchange to the L2. So I'm hoping to see more of that in 2022. And speaking of fiat on-ramps, LayerSwap has now added zkSync to their portfolio, so you can now bridge ETH directly from your Binance, Coinbase, KuCoin, KuCoin, Huobi, and more account to zkSync without losing on gas fees, and it's fast. You can go to layerswap.io to try this out. Now, LayerSwap, I believe, is a centralized service that basically is an intermediary that sits between a centralized exchange and the L2, and will basically take on the cost for you, because they're taking kind of like a fee on that. It's an option for you guys to use, but just keep in mind that it is like pretty centralized. But at the end of the day, like, so is a centralized exchange. So it's kind of like, okay, well, they're both centralized. What's more risky? Depends what centralized exchange you're coming from. Like, I would consider, KuCoin much more risky than a Coinbase, for example. I would consider Huobi much more risky than a Binance because it's based in China, for example. So at least I believe Huobi's based in China, or maybe Korea, but somewhere where there's heavy regulations. Then Huobi's always been in the news about heavy regulations, but still, it's all based on your risk preference. I mean, pretty much everything in crypto is based on your risk preference, but this is just another option for you guys if you want to directly kind of onboard onto zkSync or other L2s from centralized exchanges. So Slingshot has now been deployed to Optimism. This is pretty quick. This is pretty fast. So really great to see Slingshot on Optimism here. So as you guys know, if you've been using Slingshot before on the Polygon POS chain, you'll know just how smooth it is to use. They've got like DEX liquidity with centralized exchange performance, real-time charts for every token, and positive slippage. And their videos are always pretty cool here. So you can go check this out on Optimism. Just another way for you to trade on there. I believe they're on Arbitrum, and I mean, they're on Polygon POS chain. I believe they're on Arbitrum as well. They're going to be everywhere. I mean, this is the thing about these apps. They're pretty much going to be everywhere, but and the winners are going to be determined by a variety of different things, of like the winning kind of implementations on the chains. I don't think there's going to be that many. There's going to be a handful for reasons I've outlined previously, such as, I mean, the overhead is pretty extreme to maintain. Like, imagine you're a developer or a team of developers or a DAO trying to maintain like 20 different implementations of your app and trying to update them and try to keep them on the bleeding edge. It's not going to work. So, and really, I mean, it's not going to work for the end user either. So I think what's going to happen is going to be a handful of winners, and then that's just going to be how it is, like how it's in the mobile world, like how there's only the iPhone, the iOS App Store, and the Android Play Store, and there's a few other attempts out there. I know Samsung had their own store for a bit, and there's a couple of other smaller ones, but they didn't really go anywhere. But it might turn out to be there's more than just two dominant platforms within crypto. I believe there will be. Like, I don't think there's only going to be two dominant L2s or two dominant L1s. But see, and then I kind of like think about this as well. It's kind of like the L1s. You guys know my views on the L1s is that they all have to be settlement layers, or else they're kind of useless. Like, even the ultra scalable ones are not going to be able to outperform Ethereum's L2 ecosystem when it really gets going. So for me, they might only be two settlement layers. I don't actually think there needs to be two. I think one makes enough sense, but there probably will be at least two, maybe even three, but I don't know. I don't really see it. But in terms of like execution layers, the L2s and things like that, there's going to be many of them. But in terms of like the winners, it's going to definitely be look like a power law distribution where 90% of the activity will just be on a handful of them, and then the rest of them will kind of fight over that last 10% there. So Mahalo from Polygon announced that Stephen Curry has joined the Polygon family with an NFT collection. So this is pretty cool. Polygon's NFT drops have been pretty big lately. They've had Dolce & Gabbana, they've had NFL, they've had DraftKings, Macy's, and a bunch of other brands launching on there. So as I said, guys, this is their business development team at work. This doesn't just happen, right? It's not like these big companies have all gone to Polygon and been like, we want to do our NFTs on you. Some of them maybe, but a lot of it's got to do with having like a dedicated business development team or teams that go out there, talk to these brands, build relationships, and actually get these things to launch on Polygon instead of somewhere else. Like these kind of like big companies, they aren't just looking at one solution. They look at many other many different solutions, and whoever has the best pitch and whoever has the best business development team and who is the one that onboards them. So Polygon really does. I mean, Immutable X is also another example of a great business development team that has been able to get big brands on board, such as TikTok and other ones like that. But Polygon, yeah, I mean, he's just killing it in that kind of area too. So it's cool to see this. I believe, I think I'm saying his name right, Stephen Curry, or maybe it's Stephen Curry. I don't follow the NBA, but I believe he's a popular NBA player. But yeah, this is really, really cool to see here from Polygon. So Gnosis Safe has now been deployed to Optimism. As I said last week, guys, Optimism removing their whitelist means that the floodgates have just been open. We're going to see so many things deployed. You know, Slingshot, now Gnosis Safe, which is a staple for a lot of teams before they can actually deploy to Optimism, because they use Gnosis Safe as a multi-sig for their kind of like for their admin keys that they use, you know, for their early stage projects. So Gnosis Safe being on there means that a lot of other projects will probably migrate across now. I can't wait to see them all go across. As I said, I think January Q1 in general is going to be pretty big for crypto, especially for Ethereum and especially for L2s. We really are just on the cusp of like a huge year for L2s. I am very excited for 2022 for Ethereum. I know that 2021 has been a weird year for Ethereum, where it's funny because we had like a massive run from like $700 to $4,400 in May to May at the start of this year, and then we had the crash, and then since then ETH's kind of like hovered around $4,000. So I mean, gone up and down, hasn't really done much since May in terms of price. But it's done a lot on the fundamental side of things. But at the same time, there's been other L1 ecosystems that have pumped a lot in price because of Ethereum's kind of like quote unquote failings in the scaling department. But I think because Ethereum has been trying to scale the right way, right, the decentralized way, it's taken longer, but we're finally there. And I think 2022 is going to be the year where Ethereum actually takes the scaling narrative back in a really big way. And allows lots of users to onboard and experience Ethereum without the expensive fees. And, you know, the funny thing is these other L1s are allowing users to experience Ethereum without the high fees because they're EVMs, right? Like, for example, the Avalanche C chain is an EVM chain. Phantom is EVM compatible as well. There's a few others out there that have EVM compatibility. It's basically all Ethereum, just on... It's not the Ethereum blockchain, but it is the Ethereum experience. So you have your MetaMask, you have your kind of like your Etherscan like block explorer. You have the same kind of UX just generally from there in terms of how to do transactions and gas and all that sort of stuff. So I think people are going to really enjoy the same experience on Optimism and Arbitrum, and we also need to kind of like keep pushing the virtues of how these things inherit Ethereum security and decentralization. They are better than these alt L1s from that perspective, and I think we will, especially when they have tokens. Man, when these things have tokens, it's going to be such a narrative shift. It's going to, you're going to break your neck just trying to catch the narrative shift because it's going to go by so very, very, very quickly. And from one day to the next, it'll just be, oh, Ethereum scaling, buy this token and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, anyway, cool to see Gnosis Safe on Optimism here. And the last update comes out of DiversiFi. So if you're looking to buy crypto with fiat on L2, ETH, well, you can because DiversiFi is integrated with MoonPay. So basically, MoonPay is acting as a fiat on-ramp for DiversiFi's L2 ecosystem. So just another one of these fiat on-ramps. They're all coming. They're coming in waves. Everyone knows that we've needed them. I'm actually really surprised that we're getting the fiat on-ramps earlier than we're getting the centralized exchange on-ramps. Because as I've said to you guys plenty of times, it's such low-hanging fruit for these centralized exchanges to do this. It's an in-demand thing. Their customers want this. People are asking for it, and yet they're dragging their feet, whereas these fiat on-ramps like that aren't centralized exchange, I mean, they kind of are centralized exchanges, but they're not like the Coinbase or the Binances of the world. They're kind of just like a fiat portal, so to speak, rather than an exchange. They're just beating them to the punch. So they're going to get a lot of users out of this, I believe. And also the L2s that they're supporting are going to get a lot of new users too. And that's what we love to see when we see these kind of like fiat on-ramps and stuff like that. But anyway, go check this out if you're a user of DiversiFi or want to be a user of DiversiFi. It's an easy way to get onboarded there. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.